Alright everybody, welcome back to another Xvault gaming video. Xvault here, and today, boy oh boy, there's no necessarily any news, but I do have to speak a little bit more on some interactions I've been having recently on social media in regards to Xbox fanboys, or what's known as Xbots, as opposed to the PlayStation fanboys, which are called ponies and all that stuff there. But I want to go over my interaction with some folks in regards to the recent Activision stuff and what kind of caused this. And I just want to break some things down and see what everybody else kind of thinks about the whole ordeal as a whole, industry standard and all that stuff as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump to it. Alright, so like I was saying, what I want to go over is my recent interaction on social media with some folks in regards to Xbots, its acquisition of Activision and Blizzard. What was going on is recently Aaron Greenberg, on the Xbox side of things, did have a profile update that had him doing the X sign with Crash Bandicoot right next to him doing the X sign. The only thing that I mentioned on there is that I just find it like, maybe in poor taste or just kind of really pretentious more than poor taste overall. But just because of the fact it hasn't even, it's been maybe 2 weeks, and he has that up there. The deal hasn't been signed, nothing's going on, but they're touting all this stuff, something that Crash has been synonymous with the PlayStation brand, whether it's been multi-platform for 20 years or not. It's just always been synonymous with when Naughty Dog first had it before they sold off the rights, and it just being on PlayStation 1 and 2 before it went to being multi-plat. So that's pretty much all I said. It's pretentious. I do not like pretentious people. It's a big pet peeve of mine. So yeah, right. Freedom of speech. Anybody can say what they want, do what they want. But anyways, that's what brought it up, is I just thought it was pretentious. And it's just like, it opens up the door to a bunch of myriad of a different, aspects of gaming as a whole and everything. So what that brought to the attention was I had some interaction with folks, many different folks. And folks being the fanboys, delusional fanboys. One part brought up the fact that it's okay, it's not pretentious, it's not in poor taste, which whatever, maybe that is just my opinion. I still think it's pretentious, but it's not the end of the world. It doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. I just think it's pretentious. Again, something I don't like. But the fact of the matter is, what's going on is we got some feedback from some other folks here chiming in saying stuff like, you know what, it's not a big deal. I mean, who cares? It's not a bad deal. It's and that's what they get. I mean, Sony has poor taste for locking exclusives time down, and that's much worse. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me it's much worse to have a, quote, timed exclusive as opposed to somebody buying out an entire company to lock that exclusive to their company if they choose to do so at any given time. That's what you're telling me. There's no rebuttal to that for a certain amount of time, and then it comes back. That's not what I meant. That's not what's going on. Well, that's pretty much what was being implied. And then it was told, I've had a few folks saying stuff about Knights of the Old Republic, and then it was stolen. That's what made me chime in too, is it was stolen from Xbox. Knights of the Old Republic was stolen by Sony from Xbox. Now, this is hilarious, given the fact that even the old school version of Knights of the Old Republic is now even going to be on Switch if it isn't already. I just don't remember the timeline. But nobody stole Knights of the Old Republic from Xbox. Whether it was not on Sony at all or whatever the case is, it was also on PC. It was on PC. It was not console exclusive Xbox, not even on PC or anywhere. It was not, you don't own that IP. You don't own LucasArts. You don't own any of that stuff. Nobody stole anything, just like Microsoft didn't steal Activision and Blizzard. They bought Activision and Blizzard permanently, where I had to get on there and say, Knights of the Old Republic is a timed console exclusive. This will also be on PC. Knights of the Old Republic is a timed exclusive. They didn't believe me. I had to pull the link. Wasn't too hard to find. Wasn't too hard to sought after. Go sought after it, right? It's unfathomable about how many Xbox fanboys perceive Sony as these horrible, awful business people, which again, any business is not your friend. I've said this a billion times. So the fact that you go to bat for them like they're your best friend and the other corporation is pure evil, guess what? Every corporation and every business being on a certain level of making money or higher is probably pretty evil and pretty selfish and in it to make money. I hate to break it to all the gamers out there. That's just how it goes. But the fact that they were even comparable to a timed exclusive to a permanent buyout of a company where more than likely most of those IPs will be exclusive, if not all of them, given enough time. Not too hard to comprehend. What's going on there? Microsoft opens up their wallets and buys stuff. They have no growth, and I have nothing against Xbox necessarily, but they don't have any originality or creativity outside of Forza and Gears and Halo, and those franchises have been around for a long time. The same with Fable, and they just had different iterations and swapping hands with who's developing it and having possible issues here and there internally developed. And I mean, look no later than Halo Infinite. Sea of Thieves is the most original IP that they've done, and that was super rough and boring in the beginning. And here they've made great strides, so it's a lot better. But it was basically in super beta mode when it first came out. There was no meat and bones to it. Grounded, I can consider a new IP, but still technically in a beta mode. So there's some IPs, but they're just not on the level of what is being offered elsewhere, whether that be Nintendo or Sony. There's just a different level of their AAA IP exclusives. You just can't get that type of gameplay anywhere else, hence is why you get those. Game Pass is making it easier than ever to just kind of dive in. And again, that's not a bad thing. It's a great value. It will be for some time until they increase the price to where it gets too high. And then you have to consider, okay, do I mess around enough within that year subscription on enough different games? Do I have enough time to touch it all to make that price worth it? Or is it cheaper for me to just go out and buy that game? That's what you have to kind of decide when it comes to the time of the price increases like Netflix and Disney and Hulu and all that stuff consistently do. And it's going to be a year after year. You can't sink the money in there. Microsoft isn't like, the Xbox community is just our friends. We don't care that it hits our bottom wallet. We don't care. We make enough with Word and Excel and other applications and everything else that we bring in to generate money that we don't care that we're losing an enormous amount of money with Game Pass. They're going to have to increase the price. That's what it comes down to. The other part of this I just want to touch base on is just another interaction I had with an individual that I did chime into. And somebody said something along the lines of, well, remember when Sony and the fanboys there were upset about Tomb Raider's sequel from the original reboot? Tomb Raider 2 from the original reboot. Remember when Sony fanboys were super mad? And yes, a lot did go above and beyond and shouldn't have been that way. But I said, it's justifiable to be upset about it because what happened is it was a multi-plat game for the reboot that was leading directly into the sequel that everybody was hyped for because that reboot was phenomenal and was fire. That was what was going on. So you have a sequel that was going on, and then they locked down the time exclusive on the Xbox side of things because Uncharted was coming, and they wanted to do something quick to combat that and throw some money at Square Enix and said, hey, let's do a timed exclusive about a year and a half, whatever it was. And that's where I see that being a little more upset. The other ones that they were comparing it to, well, Sony has Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo and Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake and all this stuff, right? Yes, but if you think about it technically, and I'm not just giving it a pass here, but technically if you think about it, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, not to spoil anything, skip ahead 30 seconds. So if you haven't played that or don't want any spoilers on it, skip ahead. But real quick, Final Fantasy VII Remake is an alternate universe to the original Final Fantasy VII. This is not necessarily a direct sequel to that yet. This is its first iteration. I can see that if the first Part 1 remake was announced and multi-platform right away, and then Part 2, they locked it behind the time window. Same as if it was Deathloop. That's the first of its IP, and this was made, before Bethesda was acquired from Microsoft, so they had to honor the contract. Same with Ghostwire Tokyo. And then the most asinine, somebody chimed in, and then you have people liking this guy's tweet about how he's saying Final Fantasy 16 is a sequel, and they played Final Fantasy 15. Let that sink in for a second. They played Final Fantasy 15, hence they're upset that Final Fantasy 16 is a timed exclusive because that's considered a sequel. Anybody who knows anything about Final Fantasy is the next number in line, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, without the hashtags of 10-2 or 13.1, 13.2, if they do not have those associated with them, the next actual number is not a direct sequel. Whether it's in the same universe or not, which is those are Easter eggs, they aren't even necessarily outright and out front or have anything to do with any of the other stories. If it's a new title with a new number, that is not a direct sequel. That is the most asinine response I've ever received. And that goes to show you that most of the folks that I have interacted with or know personally that play on Xbox do not care for Final Fantasy, do not care for any RPG that's a Japanese RPG, typically. That is mostly on the Sony side of things that the fans are there for, and they've grown up with it and they've liked it. Unfortunately, that's not how most of the Xbox community is. That's my personal interaction with folks, again, social media or personal, that have or prefer the Xbox console. This is why that maybe Sony pushes harder for Final Fantasy and all that stuff as well. Because I guarantee you, if Final Fantasy VII Remake or 16 or whatever the case is exclusively or even timed exclusive on Xbox, I'm not waiting a year or two. I'm going to play it because I'm a fan of Final Fantasy. That's the difference between a fanboy, a true fanboy, rather than just a fan or a preferred platform holder. That's the difference between a fanboy and a fan, is that you sit there and deny yourself for playing an exclusive game because you do not like that platform, whether it's exclusive permanently on there or whether it's timed. You refuse to play that game. If there's a game on Google Stadia, the Ouya, the Switch, the Xbox Game Pass, I'm going to play it. Because I prefer PlayStation as a platform does not mean I'm not going to play a game that I want to play. Business is business. Exclusives are going to happen. Sometimes the bigger wallet speaks, and there's going to be acquisitions. There's going to be exclusives all over the place. It's the name of the game. It's competition. I understand that. I am not mad at the Activision Blizzard acquisition. If Overwatch 2 ends up being exclusive to PC and Game Pass or Xbox only, and PlayStation doesn't get it, more than likely I'm going to play it on Game Pass or PC or my Steam Deck when it comes in or whatever the case is, because I'm not that much of a toxic fanboy. If you're that toxic, you really need to evaluate yourself and stop limiting yourself, because if your main gaming or your main hobby is gaming, why are you limiting yourself from playing these amazing games? If it's making you that salty and angry, you need to evaluate maybe some personal things in your life, and you need to evaluate your own happiness, because you need to stop limiting yourself. That's all I'm saying. But if you want to choose to be that way, so be it. Nobody can change your mind. People have been trying for years and years and years to be as very neutral or open as possible and saying, hey, look, you should really try this, and trying not to bash the other side or whatever the case is, and it will not change a lot of individuals' minds. That's just the way it's going to be. That's how it's going to be. But I'm at least calling it out. Just wanted to go ahead and do this as a rant video today because it just kind of blows my mind, the toxicity of the fanboys. That's what I don't understand. Whether you agree with me thinking that profile picture in the beginning was pretentious or not, whatever. That's not the moral of the story. This just generated some other conversations that just made me go like, wow, that's where we went. So anywho, enough of that off my chest. Just thought I'd rant, have a little bit of a fun video. Also, I do not take any of the toxicity serious. It's fun to poke fun at each other. I've said that from the beginning. I'm not mad. I do find the lack of misinformation a little underwhelming and a little unfortunate. And unfortunately, I do not like toxic people. So don't be a toxic fanboy, though. Nobody likes that. Not just me. A lot of people don't. Like what you like. Do what you do. Just don't misinform yourself. Don't misinform others and all that stuff as well. But I'm going to wrap up the video there. Thanks along for the ride. Thanks for hanging along for the ride, I would say, with me here on this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It was something more of a conversation piece, and I wanted to do that with everybody. So thank you so much for hanging around. We'll get you back to the rest of your Monday. Let me know your thoughts and comments on this below as well. Would love to hear from you. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing, helping out a small streamer and content maker like myself. Would love to have you around. Would love to have you in the conversations as well. I do have in the descriptions also for Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff and Discord. So feel free to join or follow if you would like to. Always fun. I love gaming, every aspect about it. We'll see everybody next time on the next Xvault gaming video. And until then, take care.